So we're going to go through takeaways of today's session, and we're going to have Stephanie King join us again, as well as Elise. And to kick things off, I will go first and talk about the presentations that I attended. First, we had our second session of the MTech scavenger hunt. So we talked about creating, well, first of all, utilizing the wiki that exists, that SUNY created and that we can all add to because it is a wiki, to find tools that would be best to use for projects such as this. And we utilized some of the tools, a lot of the VR/XR tools, as well as transcription tools, things of that nature, to create a project in which we explored food development and creation on Mars. So there are always tools that you can use to enhance your teaching opportunities, and we encourage you to go to the SUNY MTech to find all those tools and add to that list as you find new tools. So I also attended Brian Alexander's session that talked about the climate crisis and how universities can react to that. So we talked about scaling up online learning, and one of the challenges there was having the creative staff to create content to share out. So we talked about addressing that. We talked about how to deal with the pressures of climate change within our own communities. And we talked about digitizing our own institutions' research and green computing, and how we can be more friendly to the environment in all that we do. So the last session that I just attended was from my friend Rocco, who runs Genius Academy, and she really inspired our group and talked about narrative pedagogy and using cinematic pedagogy in our teaching and learning for lifelong learners. And she shared some case studies with us and some pretty amazing work that she's doing in the psychology and social work field. And really fascinating stuff there. And one of the stats she shared was that 63% of folks retain information more when it's presented in a story, as opposed to 5% just giving text reading to retain information. So that was a great stat to share. So let's bring up Steph King, and she can tell us about the sessions that she attended.
Hello, everybody. Always love hearing about the storytelling stats. I have to tell you, I'm a little exhausted because the sessions that I attended today were pretty amazing, and just extremely inspired by the work that this community is doing. I first spent some time with members of our emerging credentials standards team, and Andrew and Robert, who presented the micro credential toolkit for outer space, which don't we all need? We talked a little bit about how things have just changed so dramatically in the micro credential space since 2010. They asked everybody to think about, and I asked you all to think about, where were you in 2010? It's an interesting question to begin with, but just how we've advanced so much since then, and the great work that our Emerging Credential Standards Action Team is doing, in part with the mini summit that we just had in April, which if you haven't checked out any of those sessions or weren't able to attend, those are all on YouTube, so I invite you to do so, but also the toolkit that they're working on, obviously, and they shared a survey with us, because really it's all about having the experiences of different educators, learners, earners, employers, to make this toolkit really be as interactive and relevant as it can be. So something Robert said really stuck with me at the end. It said, it's about the learners, they're front and center. I can't wait to improve socioeconomic mobility for traditional and non-traditional learners. So that's really key. And then I spent time with Ben and Nick in the esports session, which esports is kind of new for me. So that was really wonderful to have an introduction there and learn about how it's a $1.4 billion industry. We did some really cool activities, mapping activities and exercises in Mural, just looking at traditional sports and esports and how they relate to education contexts. And a really aha moment for me was thinking about, we talked a bit about grammar of schooling and how how we speak about school. I kept this note too. How does it shape, constrain, or create opportunities for reimagining education in light of esports growth? So I'm going to leave you all with that question. It really was something that resonated a lot with me. And then lastly, I was with the Digital Belonging Action Team for fueling universal broadband, which is a topic that I know is near and dear to so many here. And I invite you, if you have any interest in the topic of universal broadband and becoming an advocate, an activist in that space, to join that action team, because we were able to hear some of the amazing work that the team has been doing all around the US and globally, and hearing the stories was really, really inspiring for me. And I know it will be for so many of you if you were there or when you get to watch the recording later on. And I wanted to share a quote from Lisa Gustinelli, who has been doing incredible work in this area. And she said, "You need to meet someone who's embedded in the community and empower them to get connections to help sign up and the underserved." And I think that's really key, is that, you know, we can't do it all. We can't come into these communities and make change, but really making those connections and being an activist. And every act is, there is no small act. Every act is important. So something to think about.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Steph. I'm glad you enjoyed your sessions, and we'll bring up Elise, who's been working diligently to get graphic summaries completed of the 3 sessions that she attended.
Hi. So the first one that I attended this morning was the Classroom of the Future, what it could be. Started out by talking about what school was like before versus what it's like now and where it might go in the future, particularly using Zoom as a primary tool and VR, and just really using the tools that we already have and using them to enhance learning. One of the big takeaways for me was the equity and access that enables students with real-time translations and being able to really customize learning. Then the next one I did was extended reality tools. And there were 5 guest speakers who came in and talked about specific projects. But again, a big theme was equity and access. For instance, there was a project called Zoe Immersive, where kids as young as 9 years old can build fully interactive things on their phones. So if a child has a phone, they can do these amazing things. And another one, Stimuli Education, built a metaverse in a school where kids had custom avatars and were rewarded for learning, and that's working really well. So that was super interesting. And then I attended a report card for technology and enhanced learning. And this was the technology enhanced learning report card, which was rooted in research. And there were 7 KPIs that are measurable that Jason went through. But a big takeaway was that ultimately this could be used to compare colleges, universities, and tech schools. So it's got a bigger use than it has right now for looking into and seeing data and how other institutions are doing. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elise. And again, we'll post these graphics on our LinkedIn page. So please go check those out. And we'll have, Elise is going to do a video for us after the full event concludes about everything that we experienced during yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. We'll share that with you as soon as it's ready. So let's go on to a quick look. And it is quick. We're going to take a quick peek at exploring Earth's top education systems. And I'm going to jam through this because we're running out of time, but I just want to, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, folks. There's a lot to discuss in the world's top education system. So I'm going to point you in the right direction for some really cool resources. So if you haven't connected with them already, the OECD is a pretty amazing group, and they create every 3 years the PISA report, which the most recent one that's come out was in 2019, reporting on 2018 data. But basically, they assess 600,000 15 to 16-year-olds in the areas of reading, math, and science in 79 countries. So the purpose of this report is to inform countries on the degree to which their students are prepared by their education for life. And what do we mean by that? They refer to that as the full participation in modern society. So all the things that you can do by being empowered to thrive in your life. So what's the PSIA for? Again, it's looking at, it's considered the most comprehensible and reliable indicator of students' capabilities. And it can be used as a tool that countries and economies can use to fine-tune their education policies. And I've put the URL up there so you can go in and learn a little bit more about what they're up to. And then again, it's administered every 3 years. Most recent data was presented in December of 2019. And the exciting part about this, among other things, is that next month they're going to start a new survey, and that will run through September, and that data will be released in 2023. So be on the lookout for that, and knowing what's in the 2019 report about 2018 will give you a point of comparison, so you can see what direction various countries are headed in. So this is what the 2018 data showed us. So again, we're assessing math, science, and reading, and by no means should you memorize this. It's available online, but just interesting spots to look at. We are number 13 in the US for reading, and we don't rank in the other categories of math and science in the top 15. So good, interesting data to take a peek at. And an unexpected one in there for me was Estonia. We have a lot of activity happening in Estonia, and a lot of interesting work in EdTech happening there as well. So something to think about. And one of the reasons it's really important that we look at comparing education systems is the automation factor. So we can categorize things into knowledge work and routine work. And knowledge work is mostly professional work. And things that can be considered routine can theoretically be recreated in algorithms, which can be incorporated into software, which can then be automated, and then machines can then do that work. That's a bold overgeneralization of the world, but it's just meant to get you thinking about that point. So the rate of automation of jobs is increasing because it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to do that. And it's increasing in both high wage and low wage countries. So great quote from Mark Tucker. And when we say learners with the L in parentheses, we're looking at learners becoming earners and how we get them there faster so that they can thrive and participate fully in society, as we just discussed. So they have to be able to invent the future. They have to be creative, and they have to be innovative. And these are things that are really important for us to lean into as educators. So what does that mean? We're talking about not just giving everyone a basic education, but really leaning into applicable knowledge. So yes, basic education checks a box, but are they going to be able to take this knowledge, and is it available to everyone to take into their lives so that they can find fulfillment in their lives and their jobs? So complex problem solving, creativity, data synthesis, pattern recognition, being able to work with others, being able to pivot between leadership roles and playing well in the sandbox with others on a team, and having a high ethical standard. These are what are considered the soft skills, the 21st, 22nd century skills that it's going to take to get people into jobs in which they can earn livable wages and beyond. So if you want to check out the 2018 insights, QR code is here. You can scan it, look at a PDF of that report, and then a couple of other resources for you. European EdTech Alliance. They've got over 2,000 EdTech companies in Europe that are contributing to that ecosystem. The NAIC Nordic EdTech Forum, They have 8 countries that contribute to that EdTech community. Lots of activity happening in there. I could talk about Norway all day. Just Google it. They've got a great education system for many reasons and lots to discover there. The Helsinki Education Hub just released a 2022 report on the EdTech industry in Finland. So definitely worth taking a look at as well. That link is on our LinkedIn page too, so easy to find there. A couple of reading, light poolside reading for your summer activities. We have the oldie but goodie of Surpassing Shanghai by Mark Tucker. Another book by Mark Tucker is Learning High Performance School Systems. And then Evolving Education, Shifting to a Learner-Centered Paradigm from Dr. Martin. So 3 great books to take a peek at. And with that, we will move on to the future of communication from our friends at Robots and Pencils. Do we have Peter and DJ with us?
Hi, folks.
Hi, DJ.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Peter.
Hello.
Well, I will hand it over to you guys and you can take it from here.
Thanks so much. We're excited to be here. We will introduce ourselves in just a minute, but we want to start off with a challenge. We want to start off by getting your brains thinking and getting your input. And what we want to ask right at the top of this, because we're going to talk about communication. What we want to ask right at the top of this is, when you think about communication in the context of higher education or education as a whole right now on Earth, what do you think about? And it might be something that you think, if I were building a new education system on Mars, this is not what I would want to bring with me. And it might be something that you think, building a new communication system on Mars is absolutely something I want to bring with me. Think about it for a second, put it in the chat. We'll introduce ourselves in a second. Excited to interact with you and hear your thoughts in this session. We're going to move pretty quick, but it is going to be a little interactive. Would not recommend email for Mars. Absolutely, Cannon. I totally agree with you about that. I think that's a great example. Anyone else? Put things in chat. And I like that last slide. I don't know if you had time to read the quote, but it is about, space being for everyone and education being for everyone. How do we create communication systems that bring everyone in? Zoom, Google Docs, Slack, email, right? These are forms of communication that we have. And these technologies, they reinstate or they change practices, right? And they change attitudes and practices. We're going to move a system divided by our newest ideas and oldest traditions. I like that a lot. A multicultural system, so a translator will be important. That's really interesting point. Let's move into these introductions because I know we need to move on. I could spend the rest of the day just interacting with all of you about this. But DJ, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I am DJ Moody. I'm a client strategy analyst, at Robots and Pencils. So I have spent my career helping universities and other organizations that are in education to effectively communicate with and support their students by combining the human, organizational, and technological systems that they need. So I am a huge believer in the power of effective communication, and I'm hoping that some of the ideas that we can discuss today are going to make life and education on Mars just a little bit more successful. How about you, Peter?
And I'm Peter Wallace. I've kind of got my foot in 2 worlds. I'm a product owner at Robots and Pencils, which means that I kind of own the deliverables and the descriptions and the requirements for software that we develop, often in higher ed, but in other spaces as well. A lot of it around communication and knowledge growth. And in the other half of my life, I'm a doctoral student in education at the University of Washington, where I study open education practices, and how people collaborate successfully or unsuccessfully to create real world usable open learning products, especially collaboration among students. So I care a lot about this. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk about some principles that I've seen in the research that I think that I highly recommend, right? If I were building the requirements for communication software on Mars, these are requirements that I would want to bring to that conversation. So the first principle that I think comes from the research is strong communication happens when everyone is an active participant. There's all kinds of examples I could give in this. And I think as we think about like building an education system on Mars, we have to think about the fact that people are going to be learning things all the time in real world scenarios where they need to know things in order to be successful, and they need to be able to communicate things that other people can learn. So one quick example, there are several studies that say that people who can collaborate and listen to each other and be non-hierarchical, and I think that's a really important point, in solving puzzle rooms, these rooms where you go and you have to solve a number of different puzzles in order to escape. In these escape rooms, people who can approach them non-hierarchically can be much more successful. In fact, if you put a group of CEOs in an escape room and you put a group of 11-year-old girls in a identical escape room, the 11-year-old girls often will outperform the CEOs because they'll start sharing information more easily, make group decisions, and basically spread out ideas. In higher education, full participation is really important, really, really important, because of the value of active and interactive learning. There's a really powerful meta-analysis by Scott Freeman and colleagues, came out in 2014, the Proceedings in the National Academy of Sciences. They looked at 225 of the best studies on active and interactive learning as compared to learning where you are passive or just listening, and found that the passive learning is much less effective, is so much less effective that if it were an FDA study of if like active learning were the medicine that the FDA were testing, they would end the test and say, we can't give people placebos anymore. It is unethical to continue testing this intervention. We have to give everyone the treatment. The treatment in this case being active and interactive learning. So really powerful stuff. DJ, does that all make sense as far as like why we would want to like start out with us? We need everyone participating. We need everyone to be an active participant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing stuff in chat about a technologically enabled participatory fusion that I think really fits in well with what you're talking about.
Awesome. And I think one of the things to really think about this, when we start thinking about everyone getting involved, one of the first challenges that we encounter is that everybody brings something different, right? That you have these situations when they're non-hierarchical and you want everyone's input, that you also don't want everyone's input about everything, but you do want everyone to be able to fully participate. And it's really interesting to see how different technologies try to navigate this, this difference in participation and the value of different people's participation. I think particularly about equity when it comes to this question, right? We tend to bring assumptions with us about what people have to contribute based upon their gender, based upon their ethnicity and their race, their class, their age. Those are often the wrong things that we want to index on, the wrong things we want to think about when we think about the value that people bring. How do we create communication systems that allow everyone to contribute the value that they can most bring to this? And I think that that's a really, really important principle and question in kind of creating this. So when we think about that, right, we think about things going wrong. We think about people contributing the wrong value. What examples can you add into the chat if you're interested of where active participation failed, right? Where this went wrong. We got everyone involved and it actually was a total mess, right? Because it happens, and we need to recognize that as we think about creating a new communication system. And I'll give you a second to do that. I know that we're started a little bit late. I know these things tend to run behind, so we'll move along pretty quick. So as we enter this whole world of like, hey, we want everyone to participate, whether they are formally learning, right? Whether they are entering into a space where they're really learning, like as a student, or they are learning from each other as co-participants, right? If you are landing on Mars You probably want someone who really knows how to pilot the lander well, and you probably want someone else who knows about the geography and telemetry and where it's going to be safe to land and all these other pieces, and they will need to trade information. They'll need to learn from each other in that situation. You scale that up to all of Mars or living on spaceship Earth, you start thinking about a lot of people trading information all the time in synchronous and asynchronous worlds. We have to figure out ways to capitalize on the chaos of everyone participating, but how do we facilitate, how do we help create a space, a technology, intersecting systems in which they can all bring their best value? And I think a lot of us work or have worked in higher ed, we're very familiar with this, right? Where some systems staff bring value, some systems faculty bring value, some systems allow students to contribute, but they can be really unequal. I think about Slack as an example, right? Slack is an interesting technology in that it tends to be informal and kind of allow for a lot of fun and chaos and weirdness that breaks down some of these hierarchies. Sometimes things get lost in the backlog of that, and the search helps with that. So it's all about this interesting balance and interaction of things that I don't know how to solve for, but I can lay out the problems that I've seen and the principles that I've seen from the research as a graduate student. So DJ, how would you approach all that? How would you handle that? Like, when could you get it delivered?
When could you get it delivered? That's always the question, right? And I want to step back from that because what we have so far is, what do we want this system to accomplish, and why is that important? I can't tell you how long yet because we don't know how we're actually going to make it happen. That's what everybody is here for, right? So there are a bunch of technologies that can help, but they're not a means to their own end, right? These are tools that should be used to enable a well-planned communication strategy. So I know some great people who can definitely help you develop those tools, but for now, let's focus on the strategy. Does that work? All right, perfect. So let's use those principles of good communication that you just laid out. And they require us to let go of what we've always done, right? It means building our communication system from what we know and what we've researched instead of what we're used to, right? That's where the biases come in. This is just how it's always been done, right? So if we're willing to accept that building our communication systems is a process, it's not a distinct task with a defined start and end point, that we need to be intentional about how we plan for communication in order to avoid those biases and the other challenges you talked about, then I think we have a good starting point. All right. So we will go ahead and jump in there, and I've got some ideas for you. And for everybody here, and for you too, Peter, keep in mind, I am making some assumptions. We all do. So these ideas that we're bringing up won't be perfect in every situation. For example, I'm assuming that this educational system will include online components and that it needs to allow for both synchronous and asynchronous communication. So for example, why would I assume that we need asynchronous communication? If your structure involves anyone on Earth or anyone anywhere other than Mars, you're looking at light lag being involved. Depending on the orbits just between Mars and Earth, you're talking about 24 minutes of communication lag one way, or at least up to that. So if you add in differing schedules, the potential for interruptions when the habitat springs a leak, we need to allow for communication to be valuable no matter when people can participate. So think of these ideas that we're going to get into as conversation starters. They're tools that we can build from. They're not the one right way to do things, right? It's vital that this whole process is iterative so that when we're on Mars, we can use our ability to adapt to ensure that we survive. And communication is going to be no different from ensuring that a habitat is working properly and that food is being produced. We need to adapt in order to survive. So I'd love to be part of all of the future conversations about this strategy, but let's get off to a good start here. So your first principle you talked about is that everyone brings value, and we compare that with the second principle that everyone's value is different. So we need a solution that's open enough for everyone to participate, but has some of those guides, so we make sure that we end up with the doctor performing the surgery and not someone else on the committee, right? We don't want the CEO performing the surgery. They're good at some things. The doctor's probably better for our surgeon. So we also need to recognize that we can't automatically assume the value each person is bringing. This is where those biases you were talking about come in, because we often do that, right? We assume the value somebody is going to bring from the title they bring in, or from our experience with people who we think of as similar, even if they're not. In a classroom setting, this might be the professor who is the expert, but a student might be the one who has the thought, who shares that idea that really cements a concept for everybody. So we need to keep that in mind. The third thing that you talked about was open communication systems and fostering rapid learning, curiosity, and exploration, and needing that kind of chaos that happens, but that unfettered chaos is bad, right? So here's my suggestion. You want a structure that intentionally sets and enforces community norms, encourages people to discover their unique niche, and keeps the conversation on topic enough for learning to occur, but doesn't squash it. Is that right? All right, I caught you trying to drink.
Yes, it is.
So I want to tell you, we have an example of this working incredibly well right now with online communities of choice. Right? These can be centered around gaming, fandoms, hobbies, anything else that students might be interested in, or people in general might be interested in, right? We heard about citizen science earlier. That is a place where this kind of communication can be very effective, where people who may not be at a university are still participating in that conversation. There was another good example, there have been many throughout our time, but yesterday there was a discussion of TikTok and the creative and collaborative learning spaces that can occur within that application. And that's an exciting example as well. So we all also know, let's be honest, that can go completely wrong, right? The question came up earlier about Twitter. Is Twitter an example of good or bad? Well, it's both, right? We're in space, so let's call the places that are bad, wretched hives of scum and villainy. I've got to throw in a nerd reference there. These are places where the negative and the harmful discord thrives, and we don't want to create that kind of environment. So we'll take all of those principles and all of those requirements and break it down into something where we can build a communication system that thrives. And to do that, I'm going to suggest that there are 4 key roles that need to happen in any large conversation. And these are all happening within this conversation that's going on right now and throughout the couple of days of this meeting. So the first one is an educator. You're traditionally thinking of, when I say educator, a teacher, a professor, right? Somebody at the front of the class or at the head of the discussion. What I'm talking about here with an educator is anyone, regardless of their place in the hierarchy or in any hierarchy, that says, I have pertinent information and I can share it with the community. Anybody can be an educator as long as they have a perspective and as long as they have something of value to contribute. And like you talked about, everybody has that. The second one is a moderator. It's a background role, right? We have one. I'm assuming Stephanie is probably playing this role. There are probably others that are playing this role right now. But if everything's going well, as it is right now, you don't know who that person is, right? They don't actually need to take action. But when things don't go so well, they're the ones who protect the safe environment that we want to create, the communication environment, the educational environment that we want to create. The third is everybody. It's participators, right? We talked about participatory education, participatory learning. This is everyone. If you're not participating, you're not learning, right? You were talking about that earlier. And so everyone in our environment must be committed to being a participator. No one can simply be a consumer or an instructor or anything else. We need to discuss, we need to disagree, we need to learn, right? That's everybody. It's us, it's them, it's everyone. And then the last one is a facilitator. This, to me, this is the secret sauce, right? This is where you get that kind of chaos management and you find your way through all of those challenges that can come up in communication. Large scale discussions need someone or a group of people, or in some cases, a bot, to really direct the conversation. They may or may not fill other roles at any given time, but their focus is on maintaining the flow and the progress of the discussion. It's not necessarily on the content. They want people who are involved to get to the right places and form the right understandings. What that understanding is matters less than making sure everybody else gets there to the person as they're acting as the facilitator. So a good way of thinking about this is if you're daydreaming in the back of a classroom, this is the teacher that calls on you, right? They just want you to participate at that moment. So we're both kind of doing this. It's more appropriate when there are more than two people talking, but I think you can see how that kind of facilitation really helps to ask questions and get things moving in the right direction. So we good with the 4 roles?
Yeah, I like these. I hope everyone else does too. And I think that there are a number of different ways you could do this, but one of the thoughts that comes to my mind most when I reflect on those roles is how people can shift in kind of a more mature, rich system between those roles. And they can do that relatively fluidly, where on one topic, I might be an educator, on another topic, I might be a participator, and I might be ready to step into that facilitator role at any moment. And I would want a rich technological toolkit that could help me in any of those roles, really, right? That wouldn't prioritize one over the other, that wouldn't value educators over participants or participants over facilitators.
Right, yeah, the goal isn't for one person or one group of people to lead the conversation.
No.
The goal is learning. The goal is that step forward, right? So the system needs to be built to ensure that. It doesn't need to be built to ensure that, you know, I'm a professor and I feel good about like everybody got my information. It needs to be everybody feels good because we all learned something, right?
This really makes me think about Paulo Freire and education as a humanizing project, right? Like the goal is for everyone to be able to bring the fullness of their humanity into the system. And how do we set up systems to do that effectively? That's like, if I were to take away one thing from thinking about communication, that being the goal would be the one thing. We're really curious, and we know we're short on time, but we're really curious what you might take away, right? What you might bring to tomorrow's sessions, which are going to be more workshop oriented about how would you build this new system? What would you do? Like, what would you take to this next thing? So take a moment, reflect on that, think about it in chat. I like this that I'm seeing, right? The goal is learning. That is such a powerful statement as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind as you're thinking about how you can move forward with this, that these kinds of roles can be played by humans, and humans do bring that intuitiveness that is difficult at the moment for like an AI system to be able to accomplish. But they can also be at least supplemented or even completely fulfilled by a bot, right? By technology, especially things like moderation, facilitation. There can be machine learning to kind of drive the conversation in a way that it has been successful in the past. So consider all of those, technological and human. How can we combine those two things and really make sure we're moving forward? All right, and I love participation is not optional. Absolutely, not at all.
And I really love that, like, rich data to guide and inform, right? Like, that's such a powerful thing for any of these roles, and having ready access. You talked about synchronous and asynchronous earlier. Having ready access to rich data can be a really powerful part of that. Like, oh, I'm even reflecting on how I played a role and I want to go look back at the data later, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Tom, your point about quashing it with systems of conformity or cultivating it with systems creativity, I really like that. I'm going to drop in one more academic reference because I can't stop myself. I've been reading and really liking a book by Jose Medina called The Epistemology of Resistance. He's a social epistemologist who thinks about how do we create systems where people who are in marginalized situations where they need extra accessibility, for example, how can they push back? How can they create resistance against dominating discussions? I think that's a really interesting, for anyone who's interested in going down that pathway of like, how do we as a whole culture come to know things? That's a really good read, in my opinion. Yeah. Absolutely as well. Man, I always gonna mispronounce that name, but yes. All right. So as we said at the start, we're from Robots and Pencils. We were excited to talk about this topic, and we just wanted to talk about this topic. If you like and are interested in the ways that we think about these things, if you are frustrated with an innovation that you want to create and you're thinking about like, who would I partner with? Like DJ said, we know people. We're not here to pitch Robots and Pencils. We're here to genuinely, like, we love talking about this stuff and we're here to talk about it genuinely, but definitely we also love doing something about it. So if you want to do something about it with us, reach out.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Peter and DJ. We appreciate your presentation. That was amazing. And I see the wheels turning in the chat.
I love it.
So yes, we will definitely invite you back and keep you in the loop as we develop projects around communication, which there's a communications component in all of our projects. So having your insights around that would be fantastic. So let's go ahead and share the slide deck again, Bayan, and we'll take a peek at what we've got coming up. Excellent. So sneak peek of tomorrow. We're going to take what we learned today and yesterday and design our education system for Mars. And we'll enjoy that activity from about 9 to noon. And we'll kick off tomorrow morning with Punya and his Silver Linings group talking about what we've learned from our pandemic exercises. Hopefully this was, as Brian Alexander said, it's a bit of a dry run for what's going to happen ahead of us with the climate crisis. So with that in mind, we're appreciative of the experiences that we've had over the last 2 years. So one other quick thing before we go into our serious play activity, we have an event coming up in October. We're calling it Intersections. It's the first of its kind and the first of many in this realm. We will be exploring the intersection of educational technology and museums. So I know a lot of you are doing work in the museum field. We have a lot of friends and supporters in the museum field, and we want to look at their challenges through our lens and vice versa, and figure out how we can help use education technology in museums to really enhance those experiences. So that will kick off. It's a 3-part series, and that will start in mid-October. So stay tuned for details on that one. And with that, oops, not yet. With that, we will go over to our friend Ruben. Dr. Ruben Puentedera, are you with us?
I'm here.
Excellent.
So thank you, Stephanie. Glad to be back with everybody. So for the wrap today, we're going to do another quick activity that's going to be, if you will, priming the pump for tomorrow's work. We want everybody to think a little bit about the 3 spheres that we're going to be talking about tomorrow, but we want to do it in a fun way. We don't want to just be very grim and say, now go consider this, lock yourself in a room, dark room, preferably at home, no fun cookies or coffee or anything like that, just dark room. Now, we have some fun while doing it. So we're going to do a shipbuilding activity as part of this. And we're going to do this in the Slido deck that, a mural deck that we created and we already started using yesterday. So I'm going to put in a link in the chat for that, so you have it handy if you weren't with us yesterday for that. So let me just copy that. And let's see if I can get that in the chat right now. There we go. So that's the link to the mural board that we have going for this. And let's see.
And Ruben, would you like us to share your screen, your slides?
Yes, that would probably be a good idea, so I can show it as people are coming in.
All right, Bayan, if we could share Ruben's screen.
Okay. Let's see. I can do it. Here we go. I think I have it.
There we go.
Is everybody now? Everybody see it? Okay, great. So here we go. All right. So what you should be seeing right now is the mural screen for what we're going to be building this ship. And now let me show you a sample ship that we've already built. Beautiful, isn't it? So we have our rocket to get us to Mars, but we're going to need to build this rocket not from physical steel and whatnot, because we're talking about building a new education system. We're going to build it from ideas. And we're going to be using ideas in the 3 categories that we're talking about for tomorrow. So let me zoom in just a touch more. There we go. So we have ideas in curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment, learning environments of the future, and leadership and culture. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be dividing out into breakout groups. And in each breakout group, you're going to be putting together a rocket. And the rocket is going to have, as we have in our rocket over here, at least one idea from each of these categories. And in addition to that, you can also add a few more things to it. So what can you add to it? Well, you can add some fuel, something that will be a motivator. Okay, so something that's not necessarily in these 3 ideas, but will be a motivator for action or to get stakeholder buy-in, something that you think would drive this idea, this ship that you're doing to build a new education system for Mars. You can also name your ship. You can also go for a much more stylish design than our traditional one here. I think that's functional at least. And finally, I'm going to take the liberty as an arbitrator to say that's particularly interesting or unusual. So I might, who knows, award creativity points. It's known as judge discretion. And the other thing I was going to mention is for the 3 ideas, for the 3 basic ideas, you can pick them any way you like, but at least one of them has to be from the ones that are already preloaded for you in the shipyard. So you have 10 ideas in the shipyard. At least one of the ideas you use has to be one of those ideas that's already in the shipyard. And one more thing, if you have any ideas that would integrate across the 3 categories, ideas that you see as saying, well, you have those 3 categories, the 3 categories are great, but I have an idea that integrates across them, add them to your ship, and that'll also get you a couple of extra points, a point or 2, depending on how many of those you have. All right, so is the task ahead clear? Again, you're building a ship. The ship is intended to be a structure around which you're going to be developing this new education system from Mars. And you're going to base the ship upon 3 core ideas, one from each of these categories. One of them has to come from the shipyard, but the other 2 can be your own, or all 3 can come from the shipyard, up to you. And then, as he said, you have those extra bonus points you can get from something that's a motivator, something that integrates across categories, naming your ship, design, and as I say, if you have something particularly interesting or unusual, that might also be worth a point or 2 for you. Any questions? Please feel free to ask in the chat. Okay, everybody is there. I'm seeing quite a few people, so it looks like we have at least a well-populated mural. And I'm seeing people start to explore. So Stephanie, shall we go to breakout rooms?
We can indeed go to breakout rooms. How many
Let me
breakout
stop
rooms?
sharing so we have a little bit more screen clarity here. There we go.
How many Welcome back, everyone. Just give everybody a minute to rejoin. Ruben, have you made it back into this pod?
I have indeed. So just waiting for people to come back. So what I think we should do is ask the people from the different rooms to quickly report out, describe their ship and what's it like.
Excellent. Would you like to share your screen so we can look at what you're looking at?
All right, let me get that up and running. 1 second. So here we go. And there we go. Can everybody see the ship? And
Yes.
all right, excellent. So which one would like to go first? Room number one. I'm just
start with
where
one.
are you? I see it. Yes, there's room number one. Let me zoom in a bit so everybody can see it. I think that should do it. Yes, go ahead. I'm listening.
Lisa, you want to run with it? I think you had the best control over what we were doing there.
I was just gonna say, I was the one just moving things around.
We had our mover and our shaker there.
Robin was right on them. She was the one that started it. I don't know. Or Cindy?
I can try. So our ship is borrowed from a colleague to get us to the next planet, and we want to have a new design for the campus that supports the hybrid environment. And we will use student design learning projects quite heavily and allow the students to earn credentials. And the fuel is going to be the excitement that our learners have as they are our co-conspirators in learning. I think that's about what we did.
Very nice. The idea of a co-conspirator is always, I find, a powerful one. So that's an excellent choice, I think. All right, very good. Moving on to group number two. Let's see if I can find group number two. I see number 6. Which one is number 2? I see it. So I got myself a find the missing object or find the hidden object activity as an extra bonus. Excellent. All right, who would like to speak for room number 2?
I can give it a shot. So it really starts with kind of that gold system there, focusing on the shared governance structure. We were really fascinated with exploring, network style governance to make, the creation and reiteration processes a little more, participatory and democratic. That then feeds into a multimodal curriculum system, thinking about, VR, XR, and AR, how can we use those tools to support individual experts in their fields? Does a media professor need to be talking about VR, but on paper? Why not in VR? And then that goes into an informal working structure. Really a lot of work that does get done outside of the classroom, over a cup of coffee, or as we talked, from our student experiences in WhatsApp chats that you have to make with your coworkers and your peers. Then that all kind of funnels up to this competency-based learning. And then we really last minute, I put in for our fuel a gamified reward system that utilizes maybe a cryptocurrency or a digital token to reward participation and create a feedback loop.
All right, thank you. I very much like the idea. Crypto these days is not quite what it used to be just a few days ago, but nonetheless, I can see where a gamified token could be a really interesting motivator there as well. So that sounds good. Excellent. So room number 3. Let's see, where's room number 3?
It's right above the title, Ruben.
Right above the title.
That's it.
Oh, I see it. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes.
All right, go to it.
Stephanie, do you think I should go? Okay. All right. So in Breakout Room 3, we really had a good conversation around centering our spaceship on students,
the student experience. So like John, previously, we picked competency-based learning. I'm a little biased, being that I built a competency-based micro-credentialing system for Digital Promise, but we all agreed that a competency-based learning system was a great place to start. And then we started to think about the learning environment of the future. And we really all agreed that it should be environment agnostic, in the sense it shouldn't matter where you are for learning and recognition. Learning happens everywhere, and so should recognition. The third thing around leadership and culture is a student-designed learning projects. We sort of borrowed two from the shipyard there, but we really like the idea that students design and have a voice in their own learning projects. And then finally, what fuels our spaceship is authentic real-world activities and connections. We've been talking a lot about belonging and about networks and connections and relationships, and there have been a lot of conversations around those themes. So we thought, what better to fuel our spaceship than those real-world activities and connections? So thank you.
Wonderful. Again, the driver of the real world activity is a powerful one. So I'm glad to see it being used as the fuel in this particular ship. Excellent. Let's see, where's group number 4? If you can guide me to where I might, there it is. I see it. Let me zoom in a bit. That's smaller ones. There we go. All right. Yes, group number 4, who went with a very, very 50s design. I like that. For those of you who are familiar with animation of the 50s, this is reminiscent of some of that. Go ahead. Who speaks for room 4?
I'll share some ideas and feedback. So kind of stepping out of a traditional model and grading as I'm doing my final grades these few days of the first summer session, focusing on that competency-based learning and using projects where there's something that we're doing together, and maybe actually building our ship or building our new structures on Mars, because we're all part of a community, and then we're invested in that community for our survival, and hopefully having some pride in taking care of one another and being able to sustain that. So.
Okay, I see that. Very nice. So looking at I see how you're using community, as a key driver here. So very nice, very, very nice. Any other comments on room number 4 in terms of specific aspects of the integration of community, or shall we? Okay, so let's move on to room number 5, which I believe is the USS Brain Blaster, if I'm guessing correctly. Yes, it is. There it is.
Yep.
All right.
That's ours. I can start off. We definitely leaned into science fiction. We're based on a new credentialing system which tracks all kinds of credentials, but it's implemented through AR and XR. So instead of it being an education tool, it actually is a AR system that starts to glow brightly green when you're looking at something you know how to do. It kind of reminds you that you have this competency and encourages you. It doles out when you're looking at something maybe that you need to learn. And so our idea is AI, real world competency recognition. That's what we're going to do. And of course, part of our fuel is the cool factor of that. It's also, it's a kind of an ongoing engaged dialogue. It's workforce relevant because now it's reminding you what you need to know. And then it also has, a lot of simulation capabilities. What else did I miss? And then we clearly tattooed up our rocket there because, it's a radical rocket.
I like the radical rocket. Very, very cool. Yes. And I like, again, I like, how you're engaging with the AI in a different way, as well as how you're bringing in the workforce relevance and engaging dialogue in the picture. So again, very, very nice mix indeed. All right. And we now move to what I believe is the last room, which is room number 6, which is, I believe, right here. I think I can just fit. Yep, there we go. Well, here, I'll move it to the side so it's not blocked by the icons. So who speaks for room number 6?
I can start if you like, and anybody else that wants to jump in. We centered ours around student-designed learning projects, and specifically in XR after that great presentation on AR, VR, and XR. Our fuel is all these pieces working together with the student-created AR, VR, and XR. And the important part was engaging with real-world challenges. And the additional fuel is that we need to account for out-of-school factors. Are the students hungry? Are they having some kind of traumatic situation at home? Where are they coming from? And I am missing something here because I can't read what's on the very tip of this. Can anyone in the group help me out? It's a little too dark for me to see the lettering here. I apologize.
I think it says connected to student worlds.
Yes, connected student worlds make it real to what they experience. For example, a history lesson, we had one participant suggest put them in the middle of a history scenario. Someone else talked about leadership and how leadership could be a part of this. That was pretty much it.
Excellent. Any other comments on room 6? Again, I'm very much liking the incorporation of the out of school factors into the picture. You know, that's not something, that's frankly something that sometimes gets left out of the picture and should not. So I like to see that not just being incorporated, but being incorporated as part of the fuel for this particular rocket. So very, very nice indeed.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I completely forgot a great suggestion another team member made was don't have a teacher and students, but have a team of educators. And we have learners, not students.
Yeah. Again, I like that very much. So thank you. All right. So let me thank you first. Start by thanking everybody for playing today. So I'm going to stop sharing now so we can get back to the main screen. There we go. And let's see if I can get Stephanie to join me again. So there's Stephanie. So what do you think, Stephanie? I'm having a bit of difficulty choosing a winner here. Everybody's done something unusually different. So I don't want to say, well, I like, for instance, as I was saying, I really like the idea of including the out of school factors here. But I also like the cool factor on the hip-to-tooth rocket, if you will, on the design aspect as well. And I like, you know, how dialogue was engaged there. So I am really having a great deal of difficulty. I mean, everybody's worked incredibly well. We've seen other teams incorporate multiple ideas in parallel. There really is excellent work here. I think it's a great seed for tomorrow. What do you think?
Yes, I think we've done some fantastic work here, and we'll let you guys vote for your favorite in the chat. If you want to just put in the number of the rocket that you like, then we will tabulate that and report back to you tomorrow with which rocket won. All right, so with that in mind, do we want to make a decision today, Ruben, or do we want to let everybody vote?
Oh, let's everybody vote. It can wait. I think they'll also, you know, build up the suspense for tomorrow. You know,
that's right. Come back tomorrow.
You know, I was talking about science fiction yesterday, but let's not also forget, you know, all the serials, you know, with Flash Gordon and so on, and you know, our hero in Incredible Peril, etc. That's what kept people coming back to the movie theater the next week, right? So
the serials, yes. Excellent. Okay, well, we're tabulating votes, so we'll let you know tomorrow morning who won. But we will see you tomorrow. Thank you again to our sponsors, Robots and Pencils, Microsoft, AWS, University of Arizona, and Instructure. Thank you for your time and your passion today. And we will see you tomorrow. And put on your thinking caps. We'll be designing our education system for Mars. So have a great restful night, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you all. See you tomorrow.